Okay, should I start?
Yep.
All right. I am officially calling this Audit and Risk Management Committee meeting to order on November 21st, 2024. The clerk has advised me the quorum is present. Thank you very much to my colleagues. And I will begin with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas. Does anyone wish to declare a conflict of interest in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Hearing none. The next item is the approval of the Audit and Risk Management Committee minutes of September 11th, 2024, which was a really great meeting. Anybody want to make a motion to approve the minutes? Thank you. Commissioner Jagdeo, all in favor? Okay, that's approved. Commissioners, I will now commence with the review of the mercifully short order paper. The KPMG audit plan, apparently we are to get a presentation on that one. The audit risk and compliance audit plan status update. Does anyone want to hold this? Okay, great. I actually have a couple of questions also. And the audit risk compliance 2024 enterprise risk management year-end update. Would anyone like to hold that one? I'll have a couple of questions about it. All right, that concludes the review of the order paper. So we're to begin with the audit plan. And remember, folks, please assume we read the materials. Okay, thank you. So Josie, Chief Financial Officer, will provide introductory remarks and introduce Kevin Travers, Lead Audit Engagement Partner from KPMG.
Hi, Chair. I'll step in and do the introductions, John. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Audit Risk Management Committee meeting. Our auditors from KPMG will be presenting the external audit plan for the 2024 year. And please welcome the KPMG audit team, Kevin, Sal, and Victoria. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kevin Travers. I am the Lead Audit Engagement Partner. I am joined today by Sal and Victoria. They're both managers on the audit. We're going to speak to our audit plans for the year ending December 31st, 2024 for TTC. We will hit what we consider to be the highlights of the presentation. We don't intend to do page by page throughout the document, but certainly we're happy to respond to questions at the conclusion of the formal part of the presentation. This is the first of two formal communications that we'll have with this group. The second, of course, will be once we've concluded the actual financial statement audit, and we'll be back before this committee to apprise the group of the results of our audit. So Victoria, if I could ask you just even to go to the audit highlights slide, please. Thanks. So this slide itself really speaks to the items that we're going to speak to in more detail this morning. It gives you an idea of how we set materiality for both TTC's audit as well as TTC IC. It gives you an idea of the areas that we've indicated that we're going to spend our audit focus. So we'll speak to those areas in a little bit more detail, as well as the process that we followed in order to develop our audit plan for the year that we're dealing with right now. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So one of the things that we do when we set our audit plan on an annual basis is to assess things that have changed year over year. So we don't simply roll forward last year's audit plan. In addition to considering items that are TTC specific in terms of your environment, we're also required to look at any changes to the accounting and audit standards and ensure that our audit plan takes those into account. Last year, you may recall that we had a very significant accounting standard change dealing with the accounting for asset retirement obligations, which TTC did a fantastic job not only planning for, but executing the change and implementing the impact on your financial statements and your financial reporting. In the current year, there are accounting standard changes, none of which would have the same impact on your financial statements that ARO accounting did. However, again, TTC has done a very good job in planning for the standard change, and we'll speak to that in a little bit more detail going forward. Similarly, the audit standard changes in the current period have been assessed. We don't anticipate them having any significant impact to your financial statement audit. We could go to the next, actually, let's move 2 slides, please. All right. Thanks. So in setting our initial materiality, we set it based upon, in the case of TTC, your expected total expenses for the year, which is what we did in the prior years as well, which results in a materiality being calculated at $65 million. For TTCIC, it's been set at 2.9 million, and that's based on looking at total assets. At year end, when we perform our year end work, we'll reassess or true up these materiality calculations based on the actual numbers as at December 31st. And if there are any changes to these values, we'll report that as part of our year end reporting out to you. We can move to the next slide. I'm going to turn it over to Sal, who's going to take you through the next part of the deck.
All right, thank you, Kevin. So this slide here highlights involvement of others, specifically as it relates to specialists that we use for the audit. So at KPMG, we use actuarial specialists in order to look at the employee future benefits liability and the unsettled accident claims liability, as these are complex, significant estimates. And then we also use an IT audit specialist team in order to understand the entity's IT environment, as well as to look at the relevant general and IT application controls. So overall, no change from prior years in terms of specialists that we're using. And then we don't anticipate any changes to this going forward as we go into year-end audit. Go to the next slide, please, Victoria. So this slide here is just a risk assessment summary, and it kind of just summarizes what we'll discuss in the next few pages. Go to the next slide, please. Perfect. So this slide here is the first significant risk for the audit, which is a risk of managing overriding controls. So this is a significant risk for every audit that we do. So it's not specific just to TTC. It's a risk that's prescribed by the Canadian auditing standards. And therefore, as it's a presumed risk for all audits, we're required to perform various procedures as outlined on the screen. And we'll report back to the committee and management at the end of the audit the results of these procedures. Next slide, please. And the second significant risk for the audit is a presumed risk of fraudulent.
Sorry, Kevin, I don't think we need to be told what you did in the audit. We'd like to know what your conclusions were.
Through the chair, this is actually the plan for the next one.
Oh, this is the plan for the next one?
Yes, yes.
Right.
So identifying the risks that they will be assessing.
We just have to sit through it?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Okay. This is the second presumed risk for the audit. Again, it's prescribed by the Canadian auditing standards, present in all our audits that we do at KPMG. And over here is just our planned outline for procedures that we'll do on the upcoming audit this year. And we'll report back to the committee through the audit findings report the results of this procedure. And I'm going to pass it to Victoria to go through the other areas of focus.
Yep. Thank you, Sal. So now we're going to transition to the other areas of focus. And on slides 12 to 16, we included some of the audit procedures we intend to perform this year. Please note that this is not a comprehensive list of all audit procedures we perform, but rather a selection of the most critical ones that are material to the financial statements. The procedures outlined in the next few slides are very much consistent with those from prior year. So I will not go into too much details on each one of them. However, there are a few areas we would like to highlight. So the first being, there is, Kevin noted, there are new PS 3400 revenue and PS 3160 PSAS standards that had been introduced this year, and they will be adopted by the TTC in the fiscal 2024. The management is in the process of finalizing the approach and analysis regarding these standards. However, we do not expect them to have any material impact on the financial statements. And if I go to the last slide, so another significant area pertains to the asset retirement obligations. And this marks the second year of our asset retirement obligation assessment. And our audit procedures for this year will include a review of the continuity schedule for the ARO, and we will perform a testing of any significant additions and obligations that had been settled during the year. And additionally, we will also review and evaluate any significant changes in the assumptions made compared to previous year, to ensure that these changes were made in accordance with PSAS standards. So now I'm going to pass it back to Kevin to go over the remaining audit planning report.
Thanks, Victoria. I'm just going to make a few brief concluding remarks, and then certainly we're happy to respond to questions. Just on this slide, we're required through the standards to make direct inquiries of members of the committee with respect to their knowledge of any known fraudulent activities that may have taken place during the year, as well as their understanding of risk. Given that this forum is a little bit awkward for those types of discussions, what I generally say in public meetings is that our contact information is available at the beginning of the deck, and certainly any members of the committee can reach out to us directly. But I should also provide the comfort to say that we make these inquiries of management as well during the course of the audit throughout the year, as well as we perform our work. And if we became aware of something that could be otherwise of suspicious nature, we would contact this committee directly through the appropriate channel. So I just want to provide that additional comfort. The remainder of the deck includes our planned timing. So if you can go to the next slide, Victoria, includes our planned timing for when we intend to perform our procedures and report back to this committee, as well as the appendices speak to the changes in accounting standards that we spoke to earlier. As I mentioned earlier, we don't anticipate that there will be any significant impact on your financial statements as a result of adopting these standards, as well as some other information that members of the committee may find useful. So with that, that's the formal part of the presentation. But we certainly would be happy to respond to any questions that you may have this morning.
Yeah, thank you. I apologize for interrupting you earlier. So do I understand correctly that the field work is done?
No, the field work, if you can go back to the slide with the timing. So the field work actually takes place with the December year end. So looking at 2024, we're doing some interim work now, and then the year end work is to come.
Okay, I'm just reading that the interim field work was to be done in early October. Did that happen?
Yeah, we've performed interim procedures already. It's just the year end work actually hasn't taken place yet.
Okay. Any questions, colleagues? No questions?
That's my question.
Okay. Or is anything different or new here from last year? I mean, I understand that the standards continue to evolve, but in terms of the scope of work, is there anything new?
No, not of any significance.
All right. And you haven't found anything of concern in your interim field work?
That's correct. Nothing of concern through the performance of the interim work.
Does anyone wish to speak on this?
Just a couple comments. I mean, this looks fairly typical for what an accounting engagement looks like based on, I think, our collective experience working with auditors. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the results look like, and the fact that we haven't found anything fishy or suspicious in the interim, I think, is a very good sign that our controls are in place and our staff are doing our job. So kudos to staff, and KPMG, thank you again for taking this very thankless role on. It's very important, and we appreciate your time this morning.
Okay, yes, thank you for me. I mean, I know this is an important function that KPMG does across the city. Glad that you haven't found anything surprising. In terms of confirmation from the members of the committee as to our personal knowledge of fraud, how do you want to receive that?
Certainly from our perspective, we can, if there's anything that you have any knowledge of, we just appreciate you reach out to us. And if you don't, we'll take that as being a direct response to the negative.
Okay, so if you don't hear from us, you're going to accept that we have no knowledge of fraud?
Correct.
Okay. Anyone like to move the adoption? Okay, Commissioner Jagdeo, all in favor? Thank you very much and good luck, and I hope you don't find anything.
Yeah. Have a great meeting.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Okay, and that takes us back to the second item, which is the audit plan status update. Commissioner Osborne, would you like to, do you have any questions for staff?
Yes, a couple. I'm just curious, noting the difference in the reporting that we get when we get one of these from the Auditor General. There's a couple of things that we've seen in her or their reporting that I didn't see here, and I'm just wondering why. One is follow-up. You know, there's pretty rigorous follow-up with the Auditor General, and they come back and say we're partially not at all complete or fully completed complied with the changes recommended. And the second is the assessment of the financial impact of the item that is being discussed. So we know that you know, the bad record keeping is costing us X in lost efficiency and so on. I'm just wondering if that's like, if it happens at all or not with.
So let me take that one step individually. So we do have a follow-up process that we go through, and it is fairly extensive. Frankly, it's no different than when the work we're doing with the AG kind of follow-up as well, because we've taken that piece of it on as well. But we do take a similar approach on our specific audits as well. The piece that process started is when I kind of came on board. So we made sure that we did that on a more consistent basis. Prior to my time here, the approach was they took a bit of a re-audit process. So there's two ways to do it. You can look at an audit or a review, and then depending on your findings, you can go in and follow up on it to validate that those changes have been fixed, or you have the option to re-audit it at a future date, and then assess if those elements have been fixed or not. So it's the two-strategy approach. We take both approaches depending on the severity, and it's mainly severity. So we do have a follow-up process. We go through that on a quarterly basis, basically as these observations come up, right? And then the process is, okay, are these complete? Yes or no? If not, why not? And then we get a revised date. That's assuming the items get pushed. If the items are done, we'll say, okay, thank you. We like to leave a bit of time before we go in for retesting those elements or validating. And the reason behind that is you want to make sure that those activities are consistently performed over the course of time.
Yeah.
So that's why we provide a bit of a lag. We will be including reporting on an ongoing basis. So I would anticipate it to be on an annual basis that we'll kind of cover off whatever tests that have been completed. So that is yet to come, but we are doing that in the background as part of our process, right? And then in some cases, if the audit is deemed a significant or a critical, what I call rating, which are the highest ratings in terms of impact, then we may go in and do a re-audit at a future point in time, right? So that's the answer. The second question I think you had was around the dollars or the impact. All right. Appreciate we may not have necessarily put it in this document, but that is analysis that we do, and we do have that as part of the exercise, right? What I can say for this review that has come on, that's before you today, none of those amounts were remotely close to material.
Yeah, I figured, but
Yeah.
it would be interesting to know just in the, just
We can include that
the nature
moving
of the
forward.
problem. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I have one more question, if that's okay.
Please.
The last question is, we got a little bit of detail on those ones that you had sort of set out in the audit plan. I'm just curious about the projects, the nature of the projects that you got, because part of your mandate is to respond to management requests, what those look like.
Those are wide and varied. So you'll notice that when it comes to like these assurance projects, we come through a plan and there's a more formal process to it. The ones that management asks can be anything. A lot of the times it's some kind of reconfirmation that we need to do, but it may not be in a material area. So those are, I would say, more smaller projects, typically, right? And if there's anything that rises to the level that is significant that comes out of those processes, I'm required to communicate that to the audit committee.
Okay,
as
that's
part of
great.
the
Thanks. That's what I was
exercise,
looking
right?
for.
So
Yeah.
we'll do that if they're material. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Jagdale. Okay. I have questions about the elevators, as we discussed, whatever day it was we discussed it. The report talks about the maintenance, but doesn't give us the actual results in terms of elevator availability. We know how important elevators are for a variety of system users, people in wheelchairs, people with strollers, people with bicycles, all kinds of different needs. And it's extremely disruptive when an elevator is not available. So what can you tell us about the status and trends of elevator availability.
So based on the results that we looked at, and ours are at the point of when we started this audit, that's when we ran the data. Essentially the uptime was about 98% for those elevators, and those are for the TTC elevators in specific. We did find as part of the review, there was good maintenance processes surrounding those elevators in terms of control points and what was done. You'll notice that one of the observations we had in there was there was a slight miss on about 5 of the maintenance records piece of it out of 2,000. So I'll keep that in context. So that's still a fairly good news story. We also found that the communications part of these elevator outages were also communicated appropriately once the Transit Control Center was informed. There were a couple of areas where we found that it was a little bit different, where might kind of allude to the point that you're making, Commissioner, which was one of the observations in our report, which is when the work is actually done. So the work is actually scheduled for a certain time. But in some cases, what we found was that they weren't necessarily performed at those times. So what I mean by that is, from an uptime standpoint, an hour is an hour, makes no difference. But if you were to do some of those because the person went in and did it during peak hours, you're going to hear a lot more coming out of that, right? So that is something to keep in mind. Management does have an action plan and we've made some suggestions on how they can kind of tighten that process up. I think that'll also help us some. We've also made some comments on what I call the non-TTC elevators, because there is that group as well, to follow a similar process in terms of the maintenance, performance, and reporting. So that'll allow them to tie up. It's a little bit harder because it is an external kind of service, and you have to deal with kind of legal contracts and things of that nature to get us there. But that's what we found based on. But overall, I'd say the uptime was 98% based on the results we looked at. But I'll also pass it to management if they've got any comments.
So just in general, I think Viraj is spot on. We generally are targeting 98%. We're already at, a few times we're actually above. So I'll give you some numbers. In 21, we were at 98.3 as an overall average. In 23, we're at 98.8. This year, we're trending at 97.7. The biggest issue we appear to be having is elevator flooding, which obviously we saw a bit of an uptick on that, particularly after the big flood of July 21st. But generally, that, for all intents and purposes, becomes the biggest of the issues. That kind of, if we're not meeting the 98% target, it's usually the biggest issue is the flooding.
Okay, so that answers my trend question. What are we doing to reduce the risk of flooding taking elevators out? Because we know flooding is going to worsen.
So that's through the chair. I guess that's the $1 million question. We are looking at. We do actually have high occurrences of flooding in particular parts of the air of the system. We've seen it. We all know it. Union is a big one. The University line is a big one. And again, it's just working with trying to get some quick wins here. What we can do short-term wise in terms of trying to redirect the area out. We've got some ideas. Commissioner, longer version of it or longer term, I think there's work that we're doing with our innovation and sustainability people, but it's not an easy question to answer other than to say that there are some quick wins that we're trying to look at what statistically, which are higher areas of flooding and what can we do short term and long term on it.
What's a reasonable time for you to come back to us with an action plan on elevator flooding?
Let me get back to you if you don't mind on that, because it's appreciate, Commissioner, that it's a bigger problem in the sense that it's not just flooding that takes out elevators, it's flooding that takes out a variety of different equipment. So if you allow me to kind of get back to you on that, like I said, it's a part of a bigger conversation that's happening right now.
All right. The second question is the report just recommends that we receive the report, but it does state that there is a management action plan. Would you support a motion directing you to implement that action plan?
To the chair, absolutely. I think all our action plans come with timelines.
Okay, well, we didn't get all that, but at least we were told that there is a management action plan. Would you agree that we need to implement this action plan?
I absolutely agree.
Those are the end of my questions. Any speakers? Oh,
Allowed?
sure, I guess.
Sure. So I'm still on the learning curve, but
We'll just treat you as answering questions, Fred.
okay, yes. When you say 98%, what does that actually mean? That means 98% of elevators are working?
That's 98% availability. So that doesn't necessarily mean that that means reliability. So it's a different stat. So there are times where an elevator is taken out of service to support a variety of different actions that are happening. So when we say availability, it doesn't translate to reliability. If I take an elevator that's out of service, if I take an elevator that's fully functional, it is still reliable, but it is not available. So ultimately, how many hours of operation is it available to the customer? That's what our availability stat means.
Good, that's where I was going, because this is one of those customer-facing KPIs. that
Exactly.
we absolutely have to focus on.
It's all about what the customer sees. That's what this metric gives us.
And it doesn't have to come in here, but I presume we track age of elevators because that's a precondition to failure, so.
Correct.
Okay. Thanks.
Well, thank you. That provokes another question. So when you say that 98% availability, if it's available every night from 3 to 4 in the morning, but it's regular, but it's not available once every 2 weeks at rush hour, these don't have the same impact. Do you have some sensitivity analysis about availability during peak hours?
Dan, I think that's a question is no, but I'll turn it over to Arun, who's definitely the subject matter expert. The head of plant maintenance is right beside me. He's developed a lot of the KPIs, so hold firm. There you go.
Good morning. So for availability, right now it's all looked at only during customer service hours, which is from about 5:30 in the morning to about 2 o'clock in the morning. Between 2 and 5, we don't look at those numbers. We only include in the denominator from 5:30 to about 2:30.
Do you have the data necessary to have a spreadsheet crunch those to tell us what does availability look like when during peak hours?
Rush hours? Yes, we can do that.
Okay, you'll provide that to us?
Happy to do that, yeah, because I think the availability is there. We just have to present it.
Okay. Any other questions? Anyone would?
So Chair, just a quick question. I think we'll take the data and we will fit it within the time frame of our bylaws, which is what is peak hours.
Okay.
And we'll basically filter it through those peak hours by the definition of the bylaws.
Okay. Is the bylaw still correct in defining peak hours?
I believe so, yeah. I think that part is right for sure.
Okay, well, just worth checking.
Yes.
All right, anyone want to speak to the item? All right, well, I have a motion. My motion is that instead of receiving the report, we should direct management to implement the audit recommendations and the management action plan. You went to the trouble of setting out an action plan. We want you to do the action plan. Elevators are really important to a subset of our customers. Any discussion?
If I can say one thing, Chair, completely agree. This is great. But the one thing we will do from an audit perspective when we go in to revalidate if these activities are completed, we also like to provide a bit of flexibility if management has taken an alternative course of action that still fixes or remediates the actual observations. We're typically open to that as part of the solution.
I will not be surprised if you come back and say, yes, there was an adjustment. But the point is to get, the main thing I don't have here is a date as to when you're going to get back to us. So again, if you can let me know what's a reasonable date for you to get back on this as well as on the elevator flooding issue, that would be helpful. We can bring it up at the next meeting. Okay. All in favor of the motion? Okay, that is approved. Thank you. The next item, next and last, is the Enterprise Risk Management Year-End Update. I held this, and really what I want to know is, you're doing a lot of, as we talked about previously, you've got a lot of actions listed here, but what we couldn't see is, are we doing the right things first? And what progress are we making on addressing these 10 key risks?
Right. Okay, so that has to be tackled kind of twofold, Commissioner. I'll talk about what I consider the more program-related items, which are really what you're talking about essentially in terms of progress. So what we did previously is we did get essentially we got some consulting support that allowed us to identify, as we were building this program from essentially the ground up, to identify, okay, what are the key elements or key things that are needed as part of the program as a whole. So once we've got that, and then those were pegged onto a bit of a maturity scale and an associated timeline. So we have that information. So what we've essentially done in terms of the reporting that you see here today is we've taken those and kind of sliced it into buckets of elements of what we do on an annual basis. So from that point of view, we are picking those items that are coming from there. So those are kind of the prioritized items. What I appreciate that you're not probably getting is that full view, because right now we're giving it to you on a year-by-year basis, and we're not necessarily showing where we are on that maturity scale or how we're advancing to that maturity scale. So what I will commit to do is to get exactly that in our next reporting, to show you kind of that landscape of our what we intend to achieve over the next 5 years in terms of a roadmap and where that's going to take us on a maturity scale, including highlighting what those critical items are.
Okay, so my read of slide 6 or page 6 is you're doing lots of identifying about who is responsible for what, but not yet started to actually address the 10 critical risks.
Okay.
Am I reading that correctly?
So there is a lot of program build in there, but what is there, so coming back to your second point, I think you were mentioning, sorry, I missed that, is around the individual risks. So what we've been doing on that front, Commissioner, is we've got this concept called an preliminary risk on a page, right? Which is essentially those 10 risks. And what that actually does is it captures, okay, what is the level of priority for this risk? So, you look at impact, likelihood scores, things of that nature to say, okay, this is truly within our top 10, that's already been determined. What was our control area, or how are we managing that? So the risk on a page is really to cover off, okay, so now we know where the state of the land, what is actually important in terms of the risk. Now, what are we doing about it? So the way we've done that is we were actually focusing on what level of control do you want to be at? When do you think you'll practically get there? And what are the actions that we need to perform in order to get there? Those actions are very much tied with the corporate plan, as it should be, because these are the most significant risks. So we are doing that. We've received some feedback on these enterprise risks on a page to also include current controls in place. That was not part of our original thought process, but based on the feedback, we've received that. So we want to do that, to incorporate that, to share with this board.
Well, you knew where I was going, right? So you say here that you've done this risk on a page in the first half, well, in the first 7 months of this year, several months ago. When will they be ready to show the members of this committee?
So we're planning, because we have to include that additional piece of current controls, which we haven't included as part of it, I would anticipate it'll be the second ARMC in 2025. You'll have them all. If you want to see a few of them before, we can work through that as part of, depending on the nature of what this committee.
I'm always going to say yes to that.
Then we'll figure something out, Commissioner. We'll try and get something. And maybe the approach is we'll get, a couple in, so at least the committee also has an opportunity to provide some feedback as well. And then we can kind of adjust the others accordingly as well.
Well, that would be helpful because, as you know, we are accountable to say, are these risks being adequately managed? And all I know is the moment is you're doing a lot of stuff, but I don't have any details that would allow us to answer that question.
Fair enough. That's a fair point.
Mr. Cole.
Thanks. I think Raj touched on it in his final comments. Our corporate plan drives many of these, our management of many of these risks. And if I were to refer to page 1 of the report in the top 10 risks, for example, you can feel some comfort in terms of capital funding for new subway trains and for the e-buses, having been to the board in recently.
Waiting for the announcement, but yes, so we're.
Cybersecurity, similarly, recruitment and retention, in fact, is one of the first pillars of and the first strategic direction in the corporate plan that we're following on right now, building a future-ready workforce, and the components of recruitment and retention are critical to that. So all of this is a perspective, a simple perspective from from a perspective of risk. All of our projects have a risk registry associated with them and look at the project risks independently. And this exercise across the extent of the entire organization is similar. So not to be confused, but to be providing a different perspective on risk. And so Viraja's element is unique to that. All of these activities have momentum underway right now and are being more thoroughly addressed and more rigorously addressed through reporting to the board.
Okay,
That's where you'll
well,
see it.
if we're going to pick one to practice on, how about number 5? Public safety and transit security is something that we hear a great deal about.
So that too is part of the community safety and well-being plan that we're engaged with the City of Toronto, and the additional work that's currently underway through our wellness activity and confronting and addressing homelessness on the system. Just recently, in the last cycle of board reporting, we brought forward the plans to step now into our second year of an extended program using streets to homes and loft workers to help us remove homelessness from the TTC and put it into shelter spaces and programming that is administered by the City of Toronto. So,
So do you have a list somewhere that takes these 10 risks and maps them against other instruments? If you've already got this somewhere summarized, perhaps a list telling us where would be helpful?
I hear you. We could do that.
Yeah, it's pretty much on the risk on a page, which we just talked about as part of it. I appreciate you haven't seen it, Council.
That's where we're going.
So we've got to get it to you, right? So
Well, we're trying to do our job. Any other questions on this item? Any speakers on this item? Okay, well, hopefully it looks like you're doing a lot of work on things that really matter, and eventually you're going to tell us.
we'll definitely tell you.
Okay. All right. That would be good. We like to do our job. Okay, so we have a motion on that. Do we have a motion? On the back. All right. Anybody want to do anything before? The staff recommendation is to receive the report for information, recognizing that we're looking for further information. Anybody have anything to say or ask before we do that? Okay, this is going to be a record fast meeting. All right. Who wants to move the staff recommendations? Okay, Commissioner Osborne, all in favor? Okay, that carries. Thank you. Anybody want to adjourn this meeting? Would you like to adjourn? Okay, thank you very much. Extremely efficient, I hope that was helpful. All right, thank you, everybody. Easiest